Hi there, and welcome to Ian's Engage channel. I'm Ian. In previous videos, I've mentioned on many occasions how I'm a complete beginner at Engage modelling, and how nervous I am at opening up locomotives. In this video, I'm going to bite the bullet and have a go at fitting a DCC decoder to a loco. All of the locomotives I've purchased so far have had their DCC decoders either pre-installed at the factory, or I've paid the retailer to fit the decoder for me before sending me the loco. In fact, the only loco I've ever taken the body shell off so far is my Class 31, which I have to admit I found quite stressful. So, with the arrival of the latest addition to my fleet, I thought that it was about time that I had a go at fitting a decoder myself. So that's what I'm going to attempt in this video. The locomotive in question is the recently released Class 20 by Graham Farish, which is sporting the custom Thornaby Depot livery and looks very handsome, as I'm sure you'll agree. So, decoder fitting. How hard could it be? Well, my first challenge was to try and find the instructions for removing the body and for fitting the decoder. It seemed that the instruction sheet provided with the model was lacking in certain pieces of information that were present in other Graham Farish loco instruction sheets. Although there was an exploded diagram showing the parts of the loco, including the rough position of the decoder socket, and another diagram showing where the screws were that held the body to the chassis, there were no detailed or graphical instructions for fitting the decoder itself. In fact, the instruction sheet urged you to follow the instructions supplied with the decoder, and made general statements about removing the blanking board and aligning pins. How this was to be achieved was not particularly obvious to a complete novice like myself. Obviously, the decoder instructions couldn't give me specific instructions for the loco I was fitting it to, and only included information such as pin positions and what the different CV values were used for. Now, as this was something completely new to me, I'd have preferred to know exactly how to remove the body shell and exactly where and how to fit the decoder before I started. So fitting the decoder became somewhat of a journey of discovery for me. Okay, so first things first. I removed the 4 screws from the positions indicated in the loco's instruction sheet. This wasn't completely straightforward, as the screw heads were tiny, so even finding a screwdriver that would fit them was a task in itself. Even when I'd located a screwdriver, the screw positions were impeded by the bogies. Thankfully, I eventually managed to remove all 4 of the screws. I even remembered to put them in a safe place so I didn't lose them, so thank goodness for magnetic dishes. However, it was then that I realised that I could have actually removed the bogies. This would definitely have been something useful that could have been mentioned in the instruction sheet. I had then expected the body to simply slip off the chassis. Unfortunately, it didn't. I tried using toothpicks to loosen the bodywork, but was most surprised when the cab came away in my hand instead of the complete body shell. Again, this could have been mentioned somewhere in the instructions. But I wasn't expecting that. Once the cab was away from the chassis, I definitely expected the rest of the body to follow, but it didn't. How brilliant. So now we've just got stuff falling out. I ended up pushing toothpicks into various places along the bodywork, but it wasn't until I inserted one at the front of the loco that I managed to prise the bodywork away from the chassis. Aha! Okay. So, success of sorts. Right, so now that the body was off, I could get a good look at how the interior was laid out, and find where the decoder socket was positioned. The decoder blanking plate was found and was handily marked with pin positions 1 and 6, as was the socket itself. The decoder chip I decided to fit was the one that was recommended for the loco. This was a Bachmann 36-568A, which was a 6-pin decoder that included the excellent break function on function key 2. The chip was actually manufactured for Bachmann by Zimmo, which was a nice surprise. I'd actually been looking for a Zimmo chip originally, but no one seemed to have them in stock, but I believe this Bachmann one is equivalent to the Zimmo MX622N decoder. So, I proceeded to remove the blanking plate from the decoder socket, which was a very easy task. I made sure I'd aligned the pins correctly, then slid the new decoder chip into place. And once again, it went into position very easily. So, the bit I'd been stressing over the most was actually the simplest part of the operation so far. Once the chip was in place, it was time to refit the body to the chassis. After a bit of a battle, I finally got the main body of the loco fitted. I just had to be careful I didn't get the wires jammed between the side of the body and the chassis, and used a little crowbar tool that had come with my set of tweezers to gently push the wires inside the body shell. I could then refit the cab, which, after a bit of a struggle, eventually clicked into place. The next job was to replace the screws. Now, no kidding, although a seemingly simple task, I thought this was going to break me. I first tried using tweezers to place the screws back into their holes, but I wasn't dexterous enough to keep the screws in check. They kept jumping free of the tweezers and across the loco cradle, and could have gone anywhere. I also nearly lost one into the bogie fixing hole a couple of times. So I ended up covering both holes with pieces of insulation tape as a precautionary measure. I finally had the bright idea of using a piece of blue tack on the end of a toothpick to hold the screw while I manoeuvred it into place. This actually worked really well, and once in place I could easily get a screwdriver into position to tighten the screw while the bogies were removed. Once all 4 screws were installed, I could remove the insulation tape from the bogie holes, and then I could reinstall the bogies. Phew! My model was now back in one piece. Next, I took the loco to the programming track, where the moment of truth was fast approaching. Would my DigiKeys command station recognise the newly chipped loco? Well, yes, it would, and a wave of relief washed over me. While I had the loco on the programming track, I changed the DCC address from its default value to something more appropriate, and then took the loco to the test track. Finally, I could test whether or not the loco would move, and whether the lighting functions all worked as expected. So here is my rather pretty Class 20 circulating around the test track while I check out its initial performance. As you can see, it seems to be a decent runner so far, but it still has to be run in properly, so it can only get better. The lighting functions all seem to work too, so that's all good. Now, I know there are plenty of you experienced guys out there who will be tutting, wondering why I'm making such a fuss about this installation. But this was a big step for me, and we all have to start somewhere. Opening up locos immediately after purchasing them is a risk in my opinion, especially when they're so pricey and I'm so inexperienced. Unfortunately, I don't know whether you noticed or not, but I didn't actually get away with the installation damage-free. While trying to prise the body off, I managed to snap off part of the steps on one corner of the loco. Hopefully a bit of super glue will fix that, but it's annoying having to fix something you've only just bought. I can't help thinking that clearer instructions or a better design could have prevented me from breaking my loco before I've even had a chance to run it on my layout. Anyway, putting that aside, overall I'm happy with the results of my first foray into DCC Decoder installation, if only because I've now had the experience, and hopefully I'll know what to look out for next time. Okay, so that's about it for this update. I really hope that some of the less experienced N-Gage modelers found this useful, and maybe some of you old hands out there could let me know whether there was a better way of removing the body. Either way, please let me know in the comments section. Alternatively, if you've got any hints, tips, useful tools or techniques to pass on to a beginner in N-Gage modelling, or if you simply want to say hello, then you can also do so in the comments section. Anything and everything you've got to say will be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, thanks ever so much for watching. Hopefully I'll have another update on my progress soon. Bye.